needs to be done to properly close this facility. So that's one reason we're in this situation. The application is the applicant is also showing continuous use, so they don't have to comply with, as someone said earlier, the new modern-day health and safety regulations that have taken place since this Victorian-era quarry closed, and they want to be able to retain that ability to keep the protections very limited. So, and final comment, and I don't know if this has been addressed in the paperwork between the council representing the township and the lawsuit that's going on, but this is, to me, it's very important that that the body of law that supports and sustains healthy environments, pardon me, missed it. Some of us, many here, have looked at the DEP regulations. We spend a lot of time on this project because it affects our health and safety. But the biggest problem is that the public and the host community have been completely left out of the discussion. For example, a little south of here, a small jurisdiction had a big brouhaha over a proposal of opening a Wawa on 313. The meeting rooms were filled with residents voicing their concern. I lost track of the ultimate outcome, but it's striking to compare how the matter of opening a convenience store down the street, I think it's Dublin perhaps, on a pre-existing major highway would spark so much concern and local involvement when our situation is not being given the same credibility and attention. So what's happening is the public has been left out of this process. The DEP meets wherever the DEP meets. The public is not involved, and important decisions are being made behind closed doors without the public's participation or involvement. So I applaud the efforts of the three representatives that are here today, because it's only through your voice and your efforts that we'll have an opportunity to put our nose under the tent to make sure that whatever goes on out there protects the best interest of the public safety and health. Thank you.
Why you didn't put that on in there.
I understand a lot of you have questions, and I know this.
I just want to address that real quick. Jim, thank you for that, and I agree with everything you said, and I just want to leave everybody with this. You all should have access to the DEP. They work for you. You pay their salaries. Second is it gets to the root issue of whether or not an active quarry exists. That's the genesis. And for an active quarry to exist, they needed to be hauling out 500 tons per year. And that has been called into question. So I think that is step one in this process.
Wouldn't there be tax return records to show whether or not they claimed profits for that?
Well, I don't know if the tax return would specify where the profits.
Doesn't it have to specify which property it comes from?
I think there's other parts of that transaction that we can look to. For example, where was it being hauled to? What documentation existed at that destination point? I mean, there's other investigative means to get that answer. I'm not sure that.
So we're just going to, we've got about 19 minutes before they forcibly remove us from the building. So we're just going to, we've got a few questions here. You may go first, and then we'll get to your folks too.
Okay, I turned in a number of questions. None of them got it asked, but that's okay. My point is, and it's sort of in her vein, all of the stuff that was, I've got the package from the news reporter, and it's a great package, but when you look at that table and it adds up to 500, there are supporting documentations that you all need to get, such as the scale certificates, and that should be signed by a weighmaster who should be your independent third party to say, yes, this activity really did happen. And if they can't produce that supporting document, That's just a table you're looking at. I could do that on Excel in about 10 minutes. That's not a record. That is a summary. The news reporter could have put that together. There are inventory records. You're talking about, oh, there was a flood and we lost our records. Well, if I shipped from here and there was a flood, but I shipped my 500 tons, my inventory record over at this other facility should have a supporting documentation that says I received 500 tons. So if you had this flood, that doesn't mean because it's intercompany that you don't have supporting documentation. You're not looking at the supporting documents.
Right, you're talking about the primary source materials, and you're absolutely right. But just to be clear, that flood that's the DEP saying that their records were destroyed.
Oh, okay.
Not the operator.
But still, you should be able to go in for the last 7 years because IRS record retention is 7 years. You need to know on those shipments, what was the specs on the truck? That's your tare weight. How much gas was in there? Because that has to go across the road, and by law, there are certain weight limits. And that weighmaster should know that. And you may have 23 tons in that chart right there, but now you've also got a truck and you've got fuel.
Yep.
And so you need to get to the supporting documentation. That's just your starting point. And those drivers they should be on payroll. The dynamite company, if I'm looking at this company and I'm saying, for 30 years, I'm just going to ship stock, so let me dynamite 30 years worth of stock.
Yep.
Where was it stored? Can you imagine the volume of the pile of 500 tons times 30 years? Where did they put that?
Well, that's another issue, and that's why aerial photographs or something else we have to take a look at. You're absolutely right. There are lots of different aspects of written information, as well as potentially statements from former employees that might shed some light on exactly what was going on. But your point's well taken, and we've written that down. We will pursue
Okay, you
that.
need your supporting documents and your tax records and your inventory records.
Thank you, Megan. You mentioned about sound barriers. If we can't stop this, and it does happen, is there some discussion about, we live right in front of the quarry, next to the driveway. You will be getting my pictures and my comments, I watch, and I'll send them to you. Is there any talk about sound barriers? We put sound barriers on the turnpike for residents. Is there anything in place? It is constant beeping, the explosions, he can't hear well, but he hears the explosion. The dust is in my home. In case you wonder where the dust is going. It's in my home, where the dam's home, but that's my question about the sound barriers.
Yeah, it's not something we've raised before, but it's certainly something we can.
We can't stop this.
Right.
My understanding, and I'm going to caveat this, is that, and I can let the township speak to this, but this may have been a condition of settlement in that lawsuit that they were willing to put them up. My view is that they should be required to do that regardless. That shouldn't be any kind of stipulation. Josh?
A 21st century quarry should live by 21st century regulations. What we've heard from you all today, particularly State Senator Santarsiero, because you're right here in the state, is you want to hold DP accountable so the 21st century quarry is living by 21st century. Keep doing that. Please keep doing that. Thanks for meeting with us. Thanks for meeting monthly. We're going to hold you accountable. You hold them accountable, and a 21st century quarry will live by 21st century regulations.
In and out of the quarry. How are we going to sleep? I live next to them over there. How are we going to sleep? And I mean, the dust, you can't even, we don't have central air. In the daytime, all you hear is the trucks and the grinding and all that. And you can't open your windows because of the noise. We don't have central air, so we sweat to death. Is this what it has to be? Because the quarry is getting away with so much stuff.
And that should all be subject to municipal ordinances
Thank you
and
for coming.
restrictions.
We really appreciate it.
We got it.
Really do.
Question here. Yes, sir.
I have 2 boys that attend the Christian school down the road, so there's a couple concerns that I have. Number one, is there anything being done to look into past exposure to asbestos up to this point? I know the issue from here on is hopefully being addressed. And then the second question is truck traffic. You know, the increased truck traffic, how is that being dealt with? Is that at a local level? And how is that going to be dealt with? Because obviously it would be a really bad idea to have large trucks running past the school.
Right, so the truck traffic depends on what roads we're talking about in terms of who is responsible for regulating that. If it's a local road, that's a municipal issue. If it's a state road, that's a PennDOT issue. But that's something else we can take a look at too.
It becomes an enforcement issue.
Yeah. With respect to potential impacts already from the asbestos, most of our discussion was a prospective discussion, but that's certainly a discussion we can have as well.
And to that point, similar to the water issue we're dealing with, retroactive remediation, back to the cause of the problem, right? With the water, it's the chemical manufacturers. Here, it's the mining of the asbestos. So I'd like to talk to you about that, because there are some relations there with the water issue going on.
Craig, thank you for coming. I think you talk about the DEP, but I think the bigger issue really is how you're going to get DEP to do it. Because the facts are that from in 2002 and 2003, their budget was $245 million. That budget, make it clear to everyone in here, that budget in 2017 and 18 was cut in half. DEP does not have the people, they don't have the willpower, they don't have the funding. How is that going to be accomplished? Because somebody mentioned about core sampling, DEP's monitoring it. They don't have the people to do it. And everyone's got to know that. That funding has been cut in half. And you keep mentioning how they're going to do it. You're going to get them to do this, get them to do that. It's not going to happen. Tell me how it's going to happen. Tell everyone in here how that's going to happen on $145 million.
Yeah, so you're right. And this is something you should all know. I mean, probably, most people on a daily basis, the last thing you want to think about is the state budget process. In about 3-4 weeks, the governor is going to come in front of a joint session of the State House and State Senate, as he does every year. He's going to give his budget proposal for the coming fiscal year, which starts on July 1st. And you're absolutely right. Over the last decade, the DEP's budget has been cut a little over 40%. And that has had an impact on the number of people that they have to do the kind of work that we're talking about. And I'm sympathetic to them, because I've been a person who's argued year in, year out that their budget should be increased. And this has happened under both Democrats and Republicans. So this is not this is a pox on everyone's house. We obviously have to fight to increase their budget, and it's the congressman talked before about the PFC issue from the Bergen tire fire. That's a PFAS and PFOA contamination in the ground because of the firefighting foam that they were using, and that exists obviously in even greater extent down by the old Willow Grove Air Naval Station and the Warminster Station. I can tell you, one of the issues there is making sure we have enough money in the fund in Pennsylvania. It's kind of the Pennsylvania version of the Superfund that would ordinarily be used to help clean up that kind of issue and provide filters for wells, both public and private. It's money. And we need to, and I'm going to be writing a letter from our office to the governor, asking that environmental protection become a priority in his budget for that reason. Because it's not just the inspectors, it's all these other things that have also suffered as a consequence. So that's one track. And I'm sympathetic to that argument when they say, hey, we've had our budget cut. But I'm not going to be sympathetic to say that that's the reason why we can't do our job with respect to this particular site. And yes, they have that issue, and we've got to be mindful of it. But notwithstanding that, we are going to continue to require that they do the right thing here whether it's inspecting the records to make sure that in fact this was a continuing operation for all those years, or whether it's making sure that they're doing the right thing with respect to air emissions, the asbestos issue, groundwater and surface water. All those things have to happen. And you know what? If it has to be the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so be it. But we're going to be the squeaky wheel.
There's just lack of manpower.
Sir.
Leah, you talked about with the asbestos spraying water to keep the dust down. Where's that water coming from? It has to be fresh water, right? We're all on wells. I'm concerned that my well's going to dry up because he's washing his equipment 24/7.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good point.
Kate May. Kate May.
More about water testing, because I live directly across from the north entrance of the quarry, and for the last year, my water has been brown. We'd like to know more.
Yeah, but before you leave today,
Can we get your address?
provide your information so we can look into that specifically. You got Tim?
Yeah, I'm not sure if anybody has answered this. I hear a lot of concerns about wells, private wells. Or maybe you can answer this question. Is the DRBC, the agency that regulates major production wells,
Yep.
is the quarry regulated by the DRBC in the amount of water that's allocated out of their private wells?
That is a question I don't know the answer to, but with all of these water questions, we have a contact at DEP, and I will be happy to get answers to all of these.
And just to follow up, it's just you may want to look and see what the production is allowed. So if they're talking 100,000 gallons additional a day for the mitigation of the dust control out there, you may want to see what their docket number is and what they're allowed to produce.
Right. That
And
is
it's
a
not
part.
just
It's
wells that
required.
are local to the quarry. The entire community are tied to wells that are up there.
Right.
So it's not just, this is small representation. There should be a lot more people in this room because they aren't aware of the proximity of the well that they're drawing from is right next, it's half a mile from the quarry. And I would suggest that if there's not someone here already, that somebody from the water company should be at these meetings.
We literally have about 5 minutes before we have to start exiting the building, so I think we have time for one more question. Obviously, email us if you have a question that was not answered today, and one that we have to raise with the DEP or other regulatory agencies, please let us know.
Yeah, I know.
If it is found that the DEP, whether through willfulness or neglect, has glossed over their duties to the detriment of peace, or whatever, will there be any repercussions, such as dismissal of said folks, or any career prosecution? Because if we do not do that, there's nothing to stop that from that.
If that is proven, you better believe we're going to advocate for that to happen. You better believe it.
Thank you all very much, and we will continue to stay in touch. Please make sure we have your contact information as well. Thank you.
Yep, sir. Maybe we can just it got cold in here.
When I left my office, I worked an extra hour last night.
Thank you. Good
question. Thank you.
I'm Todd.
Oh, you are?
Pleasure to meet you.
Well, nice to meet you, Todd. I was wondering if you were going to be here. I figured you would be.
Once I heard your question, we'll talk later.
That's ringing a big bell.
Thank you. Will you put this up on mine at some
Oh,
point?
yeah, sure.
Okay.